Okay, the recording button is on, and welcome to the podcast that I designed for a new class. The class is called Neurodivergence in Literature and Media, and it's a completely online asynchronous class. And so, what I've hoped to design here is a way of presenting information and points of view on the topic that are more in line with how students perceive information today. My idea is they can listen to this while they're walking or commuting or whatever they have to do. And then after they listen, they're actually responding online with short reels, with 2-minute video reels, pulling out points or relating in some way. And that way, there's very little writing in the class. I'm actually really changing my ableist style. So that's where we are. And you are going to be the second podcast in the class. Um, and actually, it's because of your ideas, not only that the class exists, but also that I'm assigning Wall-E, Pixar's Wall-E, because you loved it so much and explained to me why it's a neurodivergent kind of idea. And then I was hoping later you can talk about I know you research video games and have a relationship with video game characters who are similar to Wall-E and nonverbal. So today we have Wayne Reynolds, and Wayne is a graduate student in digital media, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce sort of what you're doing in the program and where you are and who you are as a person.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Wayne Reynolds. I am 26 years old. I am a graduate student in the digital media program, and I am currently focusing on disabilities in video games when it comes to how studying the relationship between video games and neurodivergence, and also taking a look at peripherals and psychology in video games and how it affects performance and behavior.
And so let me add here what I thought was really cool and exciting was that Wayne got a grant. I think it was 3,000, pretty
Yeah.
juicy grant.
Yeah.
Even though it was hard to get the funds even after the award happened, um,
Yep.
because this is after all a bureaucracy. Um,
Yeah.
but Wayne got a grant to buy accessibility devices for video games and study them, and then got to present his results in Vienna, which was very cool. Can you just quickly talk about that research and what you found out?
Gladly. Yeah, so we wanted to look at video game peripherals designed for disability gamers, and the idea was to use those peripherals to introduce topics of disability within a community space, because in the video game community, disabilities is still something that is relatively new and not talked about as much. And the idea was to run an experiment to have everyone use these peripherals, so these different controllers and devices, and to help sort of open up a discussion about disability in gaming and why it's important for those to be considered, because it's not just for disability gamers, it's for everyone. It's more so about access, and it was great. We I wrote a paper with Professor Jim Brown, and it got accepted into this conference in Vienna and Graz, and I was able to show some of my findings there with other researchers and help create this amazing discussion about disability in gaming. And we talked about all sorts of things, and it was a wonderful time.
And this is kind of what you want to do for a living, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, there's all kinds of things I want to do, but like going to Graz was something that I realized that I loved doing, and I would love to continue doing research and creating like different stories and stuff like that. So it's like it's something that I have learned to extremely love to do and help, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm a researcher at heart, so I get that. I'm actually not happy in a day if I don't have a learning quota met. And the days when I haven't learned anything, I'm really unhappy, and now I've kind of figured out why. I think that bug just kind of gets in you. My question about the research is because this class is neurodivergence, and I have noticed that sort of disability studies and laws, except for in education, I guess, but they tend to kind of privilege physical disabilities and the study of physical disabilities. I'm even remembering that all your accessibility devices were physical kinds of aids. Was that right?
Yes, we I did touch upon I guess I did touch upon neurodivergent specific disabilities, but the focus was on physical disabilities.
Yeah, which is interesting to me. It came out in some of my other conversations for this series that the first wave of kind of disability studies seem to be more physical. And
Yeah.
that now, especially with a course like neurodivergence, it's almost parallel to second wave feminism, where you're sort of getting a much more global approach to disability and ableism. That's kind of how I see this growth. But I want to ask you, um, you do consider yourself neurodivergent, is that correct?
Yes, I have ADHD and autism.
Oh, wait, a friend of mine put that together. She calls herself AudHD.
Yes.
Do you use that?
Yeah, I've been using it more recently because I was pronouncing it wrong. I thought it was AUHDHD, so I was like, that's a mouthful to say. But then, but then I realized, oh no, it's ADHD, which I find that much cooler to say.
Yeah, I thought it did sound cool. I hadn't heard the term before. And I kind of liked how it stressed an intersectionality between different and distinct types of disabilities. I wonder if neurodivergence kinds of allows us to do that more and see intersections. I find neurodivergence to be quite a mouthful too.
Yeah.
If you're saying it several times, you can really get your tongue kind of tongue-tied. What is neurodivergence and the sort of movement to consider this umbrella neurotypical, neuroatypical? What do these big concepts mean to you in this kind of movement toward discussing neurodivergence?
It means just being able to look at things in a more like there's a specific way of how we look about things, and I think for me it's about learning to see things in a different light and seeing things in different perspectives that help you look at things at a new angle. um it's really interesting because it has caused quite a few problems for me in the past, which has led to like very sort of like doubt or self like questioning. But it definitely, as the more I learned about neurodivergence, the more I found other people going through something similar. And I realized that not only was I not alone in this regard, that this was normal in the sense within that community.
Hmm.
And so, it's one of those things where you tend to realize that while majority of people may not necessarily get what you're coming from, there are a group of people that do understand and that like you're not alone in that regard.
Okay, so it's really about community building.
I would say so, yeah. I think because at the end of the day, everyone's experience is different. I can only speak for myself, but it feels, but when I found that there were people that were going through similar problems that I went to and I made established contact with those people, it felt nice to have people that saw certain angles like how I did, and it made me feel like I wasn't going crazy. I think regardless, we just want to know that we are seen and that we are being like understood. And so I think you do end up finding it. I feel like community would be an integral part of that community. Unity is an integral part of that community because you you want to know that your problems matter and that you matter.
Yeah, and that's so it's like two different things. One is acknowledgement as a community, that which is really advocacy and
Yeah.
kind of decentering norms. But the other thing you're saying is that you didn't feel alone when you found someone who was going through something similar. Can you give like some vivid story to that? Like what kinds of problems might you have been having that you then found a new normal within an atypical community that allowed you to see these problems or resolve them or see them anew or just change your perspective?
So one example was that one of the things with autism is that you tend to have a bit of a sensitivity to like certain things like light, like sound. And I remember my friends taking me to this sort of I believe it was like some sort of like animal reserve or and whatnot, and I had forgotten my headphones because I think you remember in class
Yeah, you have the
I loved
canceling.
having headphones on, and this
Hmm.
that was actually even before I realized I was autistic, but it always was nice to have them on because I didn't realize it, but it helped like mute out a lot of the sounds and everything, and
Okay.
it helped like like dial it down. I had forgotten them, and like it was a nightmare. Like I was basically running on autopilot because there was just so much noise going on that like if it was overstimulating, and it got to the point where I actually had to like walk away from my friend group, and I had to find somewhere quiet because like I literally just couldn't. It's like it's like when you go on a roller coaster and there's that sudden rush to the point
Hmm.
where like you feel like not necessarily nauseated, but like you need to catch yourself because you just spent all this time going all over the place, and
Hmm.
now you need to like find some sort of like equilibrium. And that's what it felt like. It felt like that my like all of my senses were like nullified in order to compensate for the amount of information that I was receiving. Um,
Hmm.
and when and my friend who is neurodivergent, they took me to the car and like made and like and like it helped me like sort of like regulate because I just like I didn't want to disrupt them because my friend was really looking forward to it because he loves cat. They had opened like a capybara exhibit, and he loves capybaras. So but they took me to the car, and I was able to like relax because there was so much like what really set it off was unfortunately like this kid had fell, and she started crying like really loudly, and it's not just like sound, it's also emotions as well. And so like that, I felt so bad for the kid, but like it was way too much, so I had to like leave because like she had unfortunately gotten hurt. But
I've heard this theme before that space is really important and that the relationship to the environment is really important. In fact, the first interview that I did, which comes right before yours, she talked about the patio as her happy place. I think she did the interview,
yeah,
and it was very much about her relationship to a space that she had control over, that wasn't overstimulating, that she had designed completely safe. Um, do your noise canceling headphones kind of let you simulate that sort of?
yeah. It's a space that I like the headphones because not only does it help drown out excess noise, but it's sort of like allows me to just sort of focus and lock in for a bit. It's something where like if I want to control the volume for something I can, or if I just want like just silence so I can listen to my own thoughts, I can. Lately I've been wearing my glasses, and like sometimes my glasses have these magnetic like sections where I can put on a filter for the sun, like the like a sunglasses. and
Uh-huh.
sometimes I will put those on because like if depending on like how I wake up, sometimes I put them on because certain lights around the school are a bit too bright. Because like normally I'm fine. Like sometimes some people do have it have react differently, and like I could manage through the day, but but like it's not a comfortable experience. And then when I get home, I'm just exhausted because my body has been trying to like work through that all day.
Yeah, and the roller coaster metaphor suggests that your frames of reference disappear, almost like Alice when she falls through the to into Wonderland, and
Yeah.
gravity, her sense of gravity is different and her sense of reality changes. She doesn't remember her name. Um, and I've heard this before also that the social world can be incredibly exhausting um,
Yes.
because you are registering way more information than other people.
Yeah. It's one of those things that social events become very taxing because for some people they're empaths. They pick up on different people's emotions and they register that as their own. And what's really difficult is that it makes it really exhausting because there's a form of masking that you have to do where like you're sort of, for me, it's like kind of like you have to kind of go off of like the beat of what's going on in that like event.
Mhm.
So like sometimes, and I catch myself doing it a lot where like sometimes if someone's smiling, I look at that and I mirror that even though I don't understand what's going on. uh,
Oh, really? Yeah.
I've caught myself doing that a lot. I told myself I would stop, but I catch myself doing that a bit because sometimes I'm just like because if I don't find something funny, I would just like have like I have like such a, if I'm not genuine about it, I have like such a blank expression. Um but sometimes that can cause problems, or like some people have misinterpreted that as like me not caring. So it really does depend on who I'm with. Like if I'm comfortable with you and I'll just I'll just like just be like have like this like stoic or blank expression. But if I do find something funny, I'll laugh or a smile. But like sometimes I don't always like laugh. I'll just say like that's funny, and I'll just have like a what's something
Right.
I found myself doing is like someone will, when my friends are texting me, they'll send something funny, and I'll just like have this blank expression. I'm just like, and the expression will be like that was funny, and I'm just like looking at it like blankly. But I do find it funny, but I don't know. I guess I just didn't like it wasn't to the point where like I found it that I had to like laugh. I don't know. It
It's almost like you're sensing people want a certain emotion, and
Yeah,
it's like you decide if you're in the mood
yeah,
to figure out how to produce it yourself or just do what the social situation calls.
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's really interesting. So, and in fact, a teacher that I interviewed said of a neurodivergent young classroom said that they pick up on the vibes of the teachers. And if there's any tension or anything going on between the teachers, she said it's a heavily staffed classroom. The students will pick up on the energy, the vibe, so they have to mask all the time and try to always pretend nothing's wrong, and not respond to the escalation of things because then the other kids will sort of take the kinetic energy. Did you always know that you had these do you think of them as disabilities or just special abilities?
Ooh, that's a can of worms. It's I looked at this. I will only speak from my experience. I looked at this as a facet of I looked at it as skills that I had. I looked at it as skills and even a little bit of a talent that I have. I don't know if I've ever looked at it as the gaze of like super abilities or superpowers, though like being an empath, I did think it was pretty cool. Um and there was a reason why, which will connect to like one of the video game character later. Um, but I think I always looked at it as a skill set, as like something that I was just like uniquely like good at. Um, because it was something that I always could pick up. I was normally very, I like to say I was very accurate when it comes to picking up the vibes of someone and like kind of figuring them out a little bit. And and I say accurate because I don't think I even I'm not always right. I'm consistent, but I'm not always right. Um, but I think accuracy is a better definition because no one's ever 100% accurate all the time. But yeah, no, I always looked at it as skill sets. Because this is more so because of other people. It's like people who are neurodivergent tend to like not always view these things as super abilities because I think there's a connotation that dismisses the downsides of these things. And to each their own. And I understand why. I would not say that I can't speak for the experience of others because I think it really does depend on how you look at it. And I always looked at it as this is something that is a part of me, and it doesn't make up all of me, but it is a facet of me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether these were essential you or peripheral use. Do they get in the way of the actual you sometimes, or are they you?
I think they are a part of me. I think that they are a part. It is something that makes up who I am. Sometimes it can be frustrating because sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes I just want to just because sometimes it gets to a point where you're trying to not always notice the small details. Sometimes you want to just like relax and not always be on edge, or you want to just be able to go through the day with little to no problems. And
Hmm.
sometimes one little thing can set you off, or one little thing can change the whole thing. And it's like you don't want to always have that. But at the same time, you know, I whether I like it or not, it's something that is a part of me. And I think for me, would I like to choose or change I choose the perspective of how it looks. And I would rather, I see both sides of it, but I choose to acknowledge that and I choose to, work with it instead of against it.
Hmm. So have you ever seen Pixar's Inside Out?
Yes, I have.
So if you're ADHD, I'm imagining it's two people in there. They're in there all the time. They're part of the milieu. It's not like you can never shove it in a closet, but it doesn't sound like you want to because to you it's part of your unique, not superpower, not really disability, but just your uniqueness.
Yeah.
And you know what, we forgot to circle back to like, so you went to this, it was an animal preserve, right? And there was just too much going on, too many hurt children. Why are these children at this animal preserve? Um, and you didn't cancel, even though you realized you forgot an essential tool to make you survive this journey.
Yeah.
But you didn't disagree. You accepted the invitation and you didn't want to like disrupt your friend. Um, so like do you feel like you manage yourself more or do you manage the situations that you enter? Or does the world, sort of ever accommodate you in any good way?
I normally have to adapt to the situation at hand. Uh, I've learned that I think it's mostly been that I have to adapt to the situation at hand. I find it to be easier if I am the one adapting versus the other way around. I tend to realize that sometimes when you ask people to assist you uh in a certain environment, they tend to be a bit more rigid. It's gotten slightly better across, but like it is still not at the point where like it's not where I would like it to be. I think there's much, much more that we could be doing to accommodate people. And I think
Hmm.
that it's still, for the most part, people are having to adapt to their surroundings and uh, instead of vice versa.
In terms of sound, I get that because my husband's hearing impaired, and what's really frustrating is you cannot control a restaurant reservation. And, I always say, please put us somewhere quiet. And, oh, it might be the sports night or it might be the band starting up. And, it's miserable for him because he feels rude if he keeps asking, what? And so he'll just kind of shut down conversation, which isn't good for anybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, you went to the car and you felt better. Did you go back into the animal preserve or was that it for you?
It was around the time where we were getting ready to leave anyways, so I kind of just stayed there.
So it sounds like you mask. You kind of like calm down and mask. That's
Yeah.
you kind of try to go with the flow.
Yeah.
Do you think of the autism and the ADHD as two separate beings?
I think yeah, I do. There's a lot of they go hand in hand, but there are two very different things, and it is something that can be very frustrating. Because ADHD is sort of executive dysfunction where like you need to do a task, you want to do the task, but because it is not stimulating or engaging enough, you kind of sit there until uh an example is that whenever there's an essay that is needs to be done, um a lot of ADHDers that might recognize this is that like you'll wait until the last minute to do it. That's because there's now a sense of I don't want to say danger, but there's like a oh if I don't do there's a consequence. Because if I did it in if there's 10 days to do the essay, I have 10 days to do it. Me doing it tomorrow, there's not that consequence yet. But like a day or two before it's due, oh, if I don't get this done now, I'm gonna fail. So that's when it kicks into gear, and I'm like, okay, let's get to work. And with autism, there's some it tends to be like a for me there tends to be like a hyperfixation or a focus and like there needs to be certain conditions needed to be met on this in order for me to operate and in order for me to do this. And so sometimes they tend to clash because like there's you may have the right environment but you're not stimulated enough, but and with the other hand you might be stimulated to do it but you're not in the right environment to do it, so they tend to clash a lot sometimes.
Oh, that's really interesting. The way you describe them, it almost sounds like the autism is more your relationship to the environment and the world, and the ADHD is more inside your head.
Yeah, I think both can be because it's interesting. At least for me, they both can be environmental and self because again it's also you tend to get distracted easily or you'll tend to focus on anything that is not like. But ADHD is like if I'm sitting at a lecture and whatnot, and the professor is going on and on and on, then my brain tends to focus on anything other than what's going on because it's just like just not interesting. With autism, it's sort of like if like there are certain things where you have I feel like this is for me it's like a sort of autism is like a sort of like a speciality in a way where like you have there are where it can I think it can be environmental but it's also like very like unique and focused on like certain like subjects and topics.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting because like it's so broad, but it's also so narrow as well, and like there's no in between. It's a spectrum, which is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. Is ADHD also kind of a spectrum?
In a way, yes. Not in the way that you would view autism. With ADHD, there are people that are hyperactive and impulsive. There are people that have problem focusing and like have executive dysfunction. And then there's people that have like the whole like kit and caboodle. I follow under the whole kit and caboodle. But it expresses itself differently in different people.
And you said you have reached out to people online or other people with who present with similar issues.
Yeah.
Can you like talk about that and why it was helpful, and also like specifically, were there certain platforms or support groups? How did you find them?
Um, so I've been doing research on different communities in neurodivergent spaces, people with anxiety, people with depression, and because those tend to uh fall under that umbrella. And I've had conversations, and one thing was was talking about like enjoyment in video games, because a lot of times I realize like I have this huge like backlog of games that I keep like adding to, and I wondered how people like dealt with this backlog. And it's common in with folks with ADHD and autism, or just neurodivergence in general, to have these things. And we started talking about it's that fear of missing out on something, and like you feel the need to like get it, because it tickles that part of the brain that causes stimulation. And so like people with neurodivergence tend to like get like a backlog, or like tend to uh overspend on something because they need that. They feel like because it itches their brain. It's why a lot of people in online communities are like trying to invoke legislate they want laws against gambling for online, because it does cause a problem with neurodivergence,
Yeah.
because they can become prone to gambling. I
Yeah,
never
that makes sense.
I never found gambling interesting, because I think this is more of the autistic side of me, because I was just like, why would I put money on something to get a chance of something when I could just get the thing that I want? I don't know. But like I never understood.
Right.
I
Well,
understand
they
what makes
speak about it as an addiction almost.
it can be, because you're constantly chasing something that stimulates your brain. That
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's a lack of stimulation, a stimulation for, and so you want something, you want to get that chase.
Well, so video games or even social media, things like that with the algorithms might fuel the same thing. You may not gamble, but maybe video games is your same outlet
Yeah.
just
I
to tickle that part of the brain.
Oh yeah, 100%. I play games, tend to be like games that are like a bit of fast pace. It does that for me, because it feels like it's one of the only times where like all of my brain, everything in my brain is cooperating with each other, and it feels like I am able to like fully like achieve like just focus and lock in and everything. Uh,
Okay, say more about that. All of your parts are working together.
yeah,
It sounds like in the rest of life, that's not the case. You have to be aware of the different parts that are maybe, oops, got to smile now. Whoops,
yeah,
didn't laugh hard enough.
yeah,
There's a certain coherence to your identity in video games. Say more
Yeah.
about that because that's really interesting.
Yeah, no. When, going around in just everyday life, I feel like there are aspects of myself that I use where like, like certain things where it's like, oh, okay, I need to use this side more. So if I am, walking down the street, I need to, or like if someone says like hi, I feel the need to just say hi back, even though I don't know this person, or because it's the nice thing to do for some reason. It's one
Social
of
pressure.
the,
Social pressure is what you feel all the time.
and there are certain aspects where it's like, you need to apply yourself in a certain way, and it feels like it feels like you're always using one facet of your brain
Oh,
to like sort of adapt to the surroundings and whatnot. But when you're playing a game, it's like for me, when I'm playing a game, there is the like if I'm playing something that's a bit fast paced, there's the hyperfixation and the stimulation of like things going so fast that like my brain is has to stimulate and keep up. But there's also the focus, certain environments, and certain rewards that I get from like not only doing the playing the game and doing it well, but like there's certain visual feedbacks, there's certain sound feedbacks that I find very rewarding and satisfying.
okay.
Um and when I'm using you know there's also like the feeling of using a mouse and a keyboard and the way how like everything has to be in tandem in order for this to work, and makes this experience worth it because it's like, oh, all of these different skill sets are working in tandem to achieve this goal, and it creates this satisfying moment of like mastery and of like complete coordination and everything.
It almost sounds like therapeutic,
It is.
almost like, I mean, I don't know if this has ever been done in education, but it sounds like periodic video game breaks would actually be focusing and therapeutic for some neurodivergent students.
I have been doing a little bit of research and study of certain therapy programs in different parts of the world utilizing it. There was a study, I think, in Germany that they had made a game to help the people with autism or with anxiety, to help them, deal with the social pressure of going out and like getting groceries and things like that. And
Mhm.
the more that they played this simulation, the more comfortable they got with actually going out and getting groceries and doing what they needed to do. And when a certain obstacle arise, they knew how to handle it, or they knew enough to adapt to the situation. And it was a small sample size, but it yielded great results that they want to try expanding the sample size more. Um,
That's really interesting.
and so yeah, it's definitely something that can create, I think, useful useful results.
That could be a video game design direction for you, actually. I think you'd be very familiar with the things that are overtaxing that could be simulated in a game situation. And you said the sound is comforting. I'm wondering if that's part of um, you have the sensory overload.
Mhm.
I'm sure the video game's not children crying, right? It's these
Yeah.
sort of pre predictable tones.
Well, not only is it predictable, but you can adjust. Like one of the things is like you can adjust the sound. You can adjust the sound to be much lower if you need to. If you need it to
Mhm.
be louder, you can adjust the brightness if you need to. You can adjust the different colors of like the user interface to like one of the things that I wish I talked about more was like the how much you can customize the game to suit your experience. I changed all of my game settings to suit me. My friends always, my friends laugh because whenever they use my controls, they're like, "What are you doing? Like this doesn't make any sense." And it's like it makes sense to me, and I know it does because I still beat them in every game that I play. But
That it's a world you control. So you can,
yeah.
if only you could go up to the children in public and turn them down, right? It's the world that you can design to meet your needs. But there's also something about the interactivity of it because you keep going like this. You're at your keyboard, you have your hands down. There's something about the kinetic engagement that seems important too. The class would want to know what you play and what video characters you're really into. I know there's one you talked about as sort of exemplifying neurodivergence. Can you tell them about that?
So I tend to play games like Overwatch because I think that's pretty much the main game that I've been playing in terms of multiplayer. But I play the main games I've been playing are Overwatch, Minecraft, Subnautica 2, and lately me and my friends have been doing this game called The Big Walk. Overwatch is a multiplayer game where you work with a team. There's different positions, and you need to basically do an objective and to win the game. I tend to play support because I think it's the most rewarding to play because your goal is to keep the team alive and to help create plays for your team to act on. And I think it's great because there is a feedback loop of you need to keep your team alive, and if they're alive, that's hitting that reward part where like, oh, I'm seeking a consequences. If I don't keep my team, they die, we lose. But like it's enough to where like the support can do everything they need, they can do everything that they need to do. And what helps with Overwatch is like there's certain sound effects like when you're healing your team, and it creates this nice sound that's really satisfying. And it just there's a lot of reward seeking behavior by playing support that I think ticks the right boxes for both ADHD and autism.
And
um
but it's also social. Like what you're saying is you are working with a team, but you're not at a restaurant coping with everything else. So
yeah.
it's like social, but also you're in control at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those roles where like you don't necessarily even have to, if you don't feel like talking, you don't have to talk because you're at the end of the day, you know what you need to do. But it's
Mhm.
also like if you do need to talk, it's not overwhelming because your goal is more focused on support is more focused on your own teammates versus what the other team are doing. Like, yes, it allows you, like, yes, you can focus on the other team, but your primary focus should be your own team if you're playing support.
Yeah, I get it. And is there anything else about the characters you like to play that are sort of, you think of them as perhaps neurodivergent in how they think or how they act?
I think there are characters in the game that are not in the support role. There is one, Juno. Juno is a relatively new character who is Vietnamese, but she has a lot of anxiety. And I think she's adorable because she's this character that has a really cool like abilities, and I love the sound of her, I love her voice lines, I love her abilities because they sound really cool. But also it's like she is a character that is terrified of the world, but also has this curiosity. And even though she's terrified, she still takes steps forward to interact with the world despite her fear. And I think it's really cool. It's a really cool trait that I actually really like about Juno. Iari is someone that I have been learning a little bit more of. She's Peruvian character who has kind of a sad backstory, and she tends to be a bit more depressed and has a bit of like self-loathing, but she still tries to honor this legacy, and she kind of learns to like each day to like kind of like heal through that trauma, and she's one of the more strong like stoic characters that I really that I really learned to like respect, and I think is really interesting as well too.
That is really interesting. It sounds like the whole movement for neurodivergence, which I can't even remember when we started using this word. I have no idea. It's at least 15 years we've used this word.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact that I didn't have a class until now seems like it wasn't used as much as we would want it to be used. But so it's important that these neurodivergent characters appear. What about in like movies or fiction or anywhere else? Are there any other characters that are meaningful to you? I know Wally maybe is something that you could gloss a little bit because I think people would know who Wally is.
There was another uh there was a game character that I was going to talk about because it's sort of like a movie, but I'll mention that later. Um, funnily enough, a lot of times their characters are never uh um straight. Sometimes people tend to like take autistic coded characters where like they are never outright autistic, but they will like sort of adopt them in a way. But the new Spider-Man movie, a lot of people loved that movie because Peter was going through a lot of what people associate with overstimulation. Um,
Okay.
so a lot of people in the community have been sort of calling him like autistic coded because uh, that's for a lot of people what that's what overstimulation feels like. Um,
Hmm.
there is a character. I don't know if you've ever seen She-Ra, the Princess of Power. There's a character named Entrapta who is autistic. Who I believe she it was confirmed that she was autistic, and I thought it was really cool because it's kind of it's getting more common, but it's really rare to see that you have characters like that be autistic, and it's not in the same way how autism is presented, because sometimes you have people who there's also that character from The Pit. I forget her name because I think I've only saw a couple episodes, so I'm behind. But uh, for example, like if you've seen The Good Doctor, Sean is autistic, but they always make it sometimes. That was actually when I went why I started questioning autism for myself. But a lot of times they make it seem like that is a superpower where you're able to sort of like do all these things and whatnot. And I can't speak. I don't. I Mine doesn't work that way.
You wish?
I wish that would be really cool. That's not my specialty. I would say is more with emotions or empaths and like reading people versus like mathematics and things like that, or whatnot. I mean, like, but um, what I think what I liked about Entrapta's version or like how it was presented was that like it talked more about the social difficulties because there are times where she generally doesn't get or she's not on the same wavelength as the other characters, and it causes a lot of friction,
Hmm.
and she may not always recognize like why they reacted, but she is able to realize that they are upset by something that she did, though she doesn't understand it. um
Hmm.
One character that I have claimed is autistic despite never being confirmed is a character called Freerin. This is from an anime, a Japanese media, where she is an elf that has lived for about 1,000 years or something like that, and she has a hard time reading and reading people. And I think one of the reasons why, and my friends have always compared me to this character because it's I don't always necessarily understand like certain things that my friends will complain about or like that they will talk about because it's hard if I can't connect with I have a hard time like understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
But what makes Freeland so interesting is that she's aware of that. That's why she tries harder to make up for it. And it reminds me of like times where it's like, I may not understand why this is important to you, but I understand that it is important to you. And
Right.
I will do my best to work with that aspect because a friend of mine loves WWE, and I for the life of me do not understand why.
Nice thing.
I don't find that interesting at all. But he really likes it, and so I may not understand why he likes it, but I do understand that he likes it. And so I try my best to like see through his eyes and understand like, well, what about it do you find it so interesting? And I watch it with him, and sometimes, and like he gets really excited about it when when they do some crazy thing and like all of a sudden a random person just teleports out of nowhere and hits somebody with a chair, and I'm just like, where did this dude come from? Why is the ref just standing there? There's another dude, just five people just showed up out of nowhere. What's going on?
You're applying logic to his beloved fantasy.
Yeah. I've been told not to do that, but I don't
I
know.
think I did that to you when we studied Wally together. And I think it because you were so into him. And I was like, to me, he's so male.
I was like, what?
Yeah, and you were like, what do you
Oh,
mean?
goodness.
What is your shtick with Wally? I think the class would enjoy hearing that since they're watching the film because of you. What is because of you?
You'll
Uh,
learn to like it and love it. No,
And they're also it's in the context of a kind of unit on nonverbality too, because they're looking at the autistic puppet Julia on Sesame Street, and they're looking at a documentary on an autistic person who couldn't speak except through a puppet. Iago was the puppet that he could speak through, and then yeah, and then very articulately. And that was kind of an example of what you're saying, that sometimes mechanical reproduction can be a safe way that autistic children can excel. So, what's your shtick on Wally?
Wally is one of the best representations of autism in media because Wally experiences the world like how many autistic people do. Wally is mostly nonverbal,
Mhm.
and they are extremely good at the task that they do, but they are also very observant. They're very curious. They like learning through other means. They like to use items and different medias and learn through those regards because sometimes they need to have some sort of emotional conduit to see through. Wally doesn't always understand some may not always understand the social uh, um, meter or gaze that is set upon when he meets Eve. This is the first time that he's like seeing something that's brand new and that intrigues him. And when he makes it on the Axiom, there's a whole new set of rules and social norms that he doesn't know.
I see.
So
Yeah.
as he is stumbling all over the place and causing a bit of a ruckus because he is disrupting the social norm. But in a way, you see that people are changing not because he's convincing them, but because he is the most human out of all of them, because he is always curious, he is always empathetic, he is always thoughtful. Wally is a character that changes the world by just being him and reminds people what it means to be human. You know, his endless curiosity and his kindness and empathy is what helps the Axiom return to Earth. If it wasn't for Wally, he was the one odd factor uh, that created that opening for them. uh and it was just it's a movie that's just really cool when you really look at it through an autistic gaze, because you start to see like the little like nuances and the little like sort of like small behaviors that he does that I think a lot of people can relate to. At least I was able to relate to it a lot because
You're right. He's very ritualized
Mhm.
and he's very mechanical and ritualized and he's organized his own space. I'm thinking
Yeah.
his little kind of pod. And
Drink.
I think what I'm valuing now in a new way, listening to you, is that a great portion of the first part of the film is nonverbal.
Yeah.
You're just watching him
Do his thing.
learn.
And
Yeah,
and what's really interesting about it is that you really don't hear him say anything, I think, for the first like 20 25 minutes. But you already have such an amazing sense of who he is.
who
And
he
that's
is. Yeah.
excellent to the writing and to the animators and to the designers, that you make someone so expressive that you are able to fully capture who this person is without them uttering a single word. And because on paper you write this and you're like, yeah, we're gonna have a character, the main character, not say anything for the first like 30 minutes of the movie, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you
That's
get a
where
sense of who he is by what he's doing, by like what his focuses are, what he likes. You understand so much about who he is through his actions.
and he's very experimental.
Experimental and expressive.
Yeah. My book, by the way, which is about non-human characters, was retitled Playing Human. Yeah. And then there's a subtitle, but it totally makes sense, Playing Human, because the non-human character usually is the most human, usually exemplifies in some way some kind of fundamental humanity that others are missing. And what I like about your reading is that Wally is who is you said he causes a ruckus, but he kind of becomes the hero because he's not mired in the levels of socialization that the humans are. And that's actually very conventional in literature. Often a character who's neurodivergent is brought into the scene to kind of shake everything up. And aesthetically, their perspective often cuts through the BS.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they don't always understand all the levels of nuances that are kind of going on. So a lot of times they can become a critical site for authors to say things through the guise of this character that you couldn't say if the character were more neurotypical.
Yeah.
I try not to make these too long for the students, so I feel like I should close. But the last question is like, what? Just pretend I hadn't asked you all these things and I just said, tell my class what you want them to learn from this neurodivergence kind of study? What do you want them to learn and what's the takeaway?
I think the number one thing I would want them to learn is perspective. I think it always helps to be able to see things in different perspectives because you never know what you'll be able to take away from it. I think that's the most important thing. I would want them to learn how to be empathetic and to be perspective.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording, but don't run away
Good thing.
because I want to see how you thought it went. But then the last time I did this by accident, I ended the meeting instead of stopped the recording. So I know. And it was one of my very good friends, and she was like, "Okay, where'd she go?" Here we go. Stop